let me sort of try to make this a little clearer. I've listed on this slide, and you don't need to read this in the back of the room, I've listed sort of the chronic diseases that Medtronic attempts to treat with some of these devices that you see out in our stand adjacent to this theater. And if you would ask, what are you doing for these people? Mainly we're implanting devices, and they're either electrical devices, stimulators, or they're mechanical devices. They could be pumps, stents, grafts, valves. Now, do we have any physicians here in the audience? A few. So if you ask the question, what do these things do? Physicians like to use the word palliation because it sounds like you're doing something, right? Palliation simply means to lessen the symptoms of disease, and I argue to my own colleagues that most of what we do is palliative. It rarely is curative, almost never curative, and it's actually infrequently restorative. But this is what physicians frequently do. We wait till things are so badly broke that we try to lessen the symptoms or palliate them. The promise of biologics, and why I think this is so important, is that these things obviously offer the promise of restoration and cure. Now, it looks at first glance that somehow these things will eclipse medical devices. I'm here to tell you that medical devices are going to be necessary to the realization of biologics because, again, they all require delivery, whether it's infusion, targeted delivery with catheter systems. And so for 50 years, we've been using devices to target and deliver electricity or mechanical devices. These same schemes will be used to target and deliver biologics. So here are some examples of chronic degenerative diseases that we currently treat with devices on the left, and I would again be able to easily answer any question in the room about where are there companies that are pursuing biologic solutions to these disease states on the left. And there are myriad companies. They're in Cambridge, they're in Birmingham, they're in Oxford, they're at the Imperial College here in London, and they're across the United States. They're in Germany, they're in Switzerland. This is a big, big issue, and it will change healthcare. And again, time will tell. I purport that this will actually take money out of the system. Ultimately, it's a very expensive endeavor to bring them forward, to develop these things. But if we can find a way to restore, retard, and in some cases cure people with these underlying biologic diseases, then they won't be in hospital, they won't be in bed, they won't have home health nurses, and by the time our children are physicians, this should take money out of the system. So let me share another theme with the decade, and this is a interesting opportunity, and again, I would argue that much of the basis of innovation for this occurred in the United Kingdom, actually during the war, with a lot of the telecommunications work that came out of Cambridge. But this is I think, one of the most interesting opportunities for healthcare in the world. It's true here in the United Kingdom, it's true in the United States, and frankly, it's how we envision healthcare being delivered in the emerging third worlds of India and China and places like that. And that's converging communication and information technology into devices. So what do I mean by that? We have historically implanted sensors in our devices, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but it's basically using sensors, radios, handheld communication devices, Blackberries, Palm Pilots, the broadband networks, and data storage to basically remotely monitor patients and coordinate their care. And I'll try to convince you that this is a rational idea. Now, this is a little schematic that I put together to try to explain this to people in the room, and I think it's pretty simple. Historically, companies like Medtronic have worked in what I like to call an intimate body network. We have implanted sensors in the body that actually work in a closed loop system, a classic engineering concept. We've implanted these sensors in the body to actuate devices. So let me give you a couple examples of that. The first device that we implanted was an implantable pacemaker back in the 50s. That device has a sensor that sits on a lead in the heart, and it senses when the heart is going too slow. And it basically feeds back to an impulse generator that says, if, I'd like to speed up the heart, it's going too slow. Simple closed loop. About 30 years ago, we put an accelerometer into the can so that actually when you get up and start walking, the pacemaker knows that. It feeds back to the pacemaker and it actually accelerates to accommodate for activity. It's called Activitrax. We have a insulin pump that we're the world's largest supplier of insulin delivery tools. They're largely pumps. You've seen these. They're wearable pumps. We actually have morphed our diabetes business into a sensor company so that we now make continuous glucose sensors that speak wirelessly to the pump and can communicate with the pump. We've just released here in the United Kingdom a pump shutoff so that when a child is on a trajectory to hypoglycemia, the glucose sensor will know that, send a message to the pump, and shut the pump off. These are, again, closed-loop, intimate body networks. We, about 10 years ago, recognized that we'd like to be able to program in the operating room our pacemakers and our pumps, and so we developed wireless technology so that we can actually speak to our implanted devices, so that if you had a pacemaker in the back of the room there or an ICD, I could take a handheld device like this and I could rewire it. In fact, I could do it from Minneapolis, Minnesota, so that someone sitting in this room, if there was someone from Medtronic here with one of these devices, we could actually communicate through the world network to this device and reprogram your ICD. Dick Cheney, our vice president, has an ICD. We could fire it from Minneapolis if we wanted to. We wouldn't want to do that, Herb, but we could. So this became sort of what we refer to as a personal area network. We did it really so that we could program in operating room environments without having our service people be in the field. But we quickly realized that this became a tool, because this is can be recharged. This became a tool to move to a so-called worldwide network, so that we can now monitor devices wirelessly around the world. Anyone with one of our devices that has wireless telemetry can speak to handheld devices across this room. And because this is a broadband communicator, we can, again, through encrypted technology, manage your device and ultimately manage healthcare. So let me show you exactly where we're going with that. So this is the concept called doctoring by BlackBerry, and it sounds maybe outrageous. I think it's real, and it will change healthcare. So, and it's bigger than Medtronic. And so I've listed here on this slide, and you can find British Telecom in here. You can find a lot of your friends in here. The commerce for Medtronic is in these green circles again, and so that we're interested in implanting sensors. And so what kind of sensors are we talking about? Well, I've mentioned to you already sensors that sense heartbeat, sense, you know, the heart goes too fast, we can actually defibrillate it. It goes too slow, we can pace. These kinds of implanted sensors. We're working on an implanted sensor that will be placed in the pulmonary circulation of a patient percutaneously. We'll measure pulmonary artery pressures. Now, why would we want to do that? The single greatest consumer of healthcare dollars in the United Kingdom and in the United States is heart failure. Why is that? Well, because people slip slowly into heart failure and they slip slowly out of it. It takes weeks to go in, it takes weeks to get out. We know that the proximate cause of admission with heart failure is elevation of pulmonary pressures because of the heart not pumping well. So it wouldn't, I hope, be a cognitive leap to anyone in this audience to accept that if I told you we can measure pressures in the lung, and that can be transmitted to a companion device sitting in my pocket. This, of course, speaks broadband through British Telecom or TalkTalk or whoever you use. And we can actually remotely monitor in Minneapolis or in London or in Lausanne, it doesn't matter where it is. With IBM, someone like this, we can actually store, and we can follow millions of people and basically sort out in this Ethernet who's on a trajectory to hospitalization. We can call it out a week in advance. We've already proven we can do this. So that you begin to see how you take cost out of the system with this concept is that we are very confident that we can keep 30 to 40% of people out of hospital who are chronic readmitters to hospital by simply monitoring their pulmonary pressures remotely through broadband communication. Again, what's interesting about this is it's expensive, it's challenging, but again, if you look at the bottom of this image, you see all the people who are interested in this. Apple is all over this. They have seen that the iPhone, for them, the future of the iPhone, they believe, is in healthcare. Why would that be? Because it's just not a very good business to have them being downloading iTunes. If you go to someone like any BT, it's not great commerce to be doing text messaging for them. They realize that this is a commodity. It's not a long-term sustainable business. I was just in Japan. Docomo Japan views this as their single greatest opportunity. Docomo is the biggest broadband carrier in Tokyo. They view healthcare management as the single greatest opportunity they have is to use their broadband networks to help manage patients. And so what I like about this story is that everybody wants in on it. And so again, and so much of this is open architecture. And the infrastructure for this is already built and being built so that my son, 14, can download Xbox games, but ultimately this will be the network that will allow us to manage patients in the UK, keep them out of hospital, and again, this will save the system money. Now,